If y'all going to church this Sunday, I suggest everybody get y'all to church and get your money back. Hurry up! If Joel Osteen didn't prove to you finally what I've been trying to tell you for 30 years, so damn scam, man. God don't live in no church. God is free, don't forget it. God don't need no money, never wanted no money. Them Romans wrote that in the book, tithing. God want 10%. Them Romans wrote that in the book. So damn scam, man. Them Romans wrote that in the book.
They have Jesus saying, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, which is basically in response to talking about money. They have Jesus saying,
to turn the other cheek.
They have Jesus saying,
slaves, obey your masters. It's an edict.
And you gotta admit to yourself, the Jesus gig is up. You gotta admit to yourself, this lie, man. It's a complete lie.
Come on, man. Y'all made this up teaching black people this book, teaching black people this book. To a fictional white character, you can make the fictional white character turn into a black man. I'm teaching black people this book, teaching black people this book.
1st, 2nd, and 3rd John was written by Julius Calpurnius Piso, and Revelation was written by Julius.
Revelation, what is it going to reveal? Because that's what it means, it's revealing something. But that book was written by Arius Calpurnius Piso, actually his second son, which at the time was his oldest son living, Julius. Was his name, Julius. And the thing about Julius, this family, see, was very, very well connected and related to royalty.
But I must share this information with you to help open your eyes and set you free.
Yes.
If it's unbearable for you, deal with it later. Because the information ain't going nowhere. You have to digest it as you can. Now, once again, I want to share with you the fact that there will be no rapture. And Jesus is not coming back. I'll say millions of black people. And I say that in particular because that's my focus. Really, millions of black people are literally in a cage in their mind. And that cage is called the great expectation of the believer. They are anxiously anticipating being caught up, being raptured.
They would just open their eyes and think just a little bit. Revelation, what is it going to reveal? Because that's what it means, it's revealing something. When you study more about the man known as Flavius Josephus, who was actually Arius Calpurnius Piso, you will find that you're dealing with probably the greatest psychopath the world has ever known. And his son was the same way. These people actually hated other people. They had no use for people. And everything was for them. And yes, he did find Christianity. But that book was written by Arius Calpurnius Piso, actually his second son, which at the time was his oldest son living, Julius. Was his name, Julius. And the thing about Julius, this family, see, was very, very well connected and related to royalty. And Julius's son, Severus, he thought, which should be the next emperor at that time. The next time an emperor's spot was open, he should be the next emperor. His son was going to be overlooked and to be the emperor. Instead, it was going to be his younger brother's son was going to be the next emperor. So, but Julius was very disappointed about it. And to show his disappointment, he decided that he would tell. So in Revelation, he is really taking his life into his hands. Actually, it cost him his head. He told too much, and it came very close. If people had known what he was writing at that time, it would have destroyed all of the work that his father had done. He mentions his father in there. he mentions Pliny the Younger, who was involved in helping them with the Christianity, making and writing the stories, etc. And he mentions his brother, etc. So they're all being called a beast and the devil and so forth and so on. In that book, he is actually talking about his father when he mentions the number of 666. Those were Greek numbering code systems, and it's commonly called a Pythagorean numbering system.
Right.
And his father was very, very apt in those numbering systems, and that's where he came up with the numbering system that represents his father's name. It represents his father's name as Piso, and also it represents him as Piso Christ.
If you go to Wikipedia and you look up that book of the Bible, right? Mm-hmm. It'll have an explanation of the book, of its history. In my experience, when you go to Wikipedia and you just look at the history and the background of the text, what you'll find is that the text that is the most impressive has been altered at a later date after the events.
So them scam, man! I mean, them Romans wrote that in the book.
Jesus predicting that the temple was going to be destroyed, that wouldn't have been particularly hard to foresee as things were getting worse between the Jews and Rome had all the power.
So because they already knew about the war that began in 66, and that war lasted until 70 essentially, when the second temple was destroyed, they all knew about it, and therefore they put into the mouth of Jesus that Jesus predicted that there would be a tremendous destruction and the temple would be destroyed.
So them scam, man! I mean, them Romans wrote that in the book.
Gospels are written after the fact. That means they're written in 85, or Mark in 70, they place into the mouth of Jesus back in the first third of the first century that Jesus predicted that would be tremendous destruction and desolation. You'll find this in the Synoptic Gospels in particular. It's almost the exact same words there.
It's another fraud, the biggest of them all, and it's a fraud at the heart of Christianity.
The author of the book of Revelation copied and pasted these prophecies and the language and the metaphors used in Daniel.
So them scam, man!
And placed them in a Christological fashion, meaning had Jesus become that, and as it says, let's say Revelation 22 verse 12, it never happened, it never materialized. I mean, people who think that this is the true Messiah, but it's not the true Messiah. This idea is found nowhere in the Jewish scriptures. It's found nowhere in Judaism.
So them scam, man!
The point is, the book of Revelation uses texts that are found in the Jewish scriptures. And it's exactly the same thing. Although we find in the book of Revelation many quotes from the Jewish scriptures all over the place, it can't be true. It didn't fulfill a single one of these prophecies. There was no building of the temple during the first century. In fact, it was destroyed. There was no ingathering the exiles during the first century, the Jews who were exiled. There was no resurrection of the dead. The Jews were murdered by the Romans in the ongoing wars. There was no worldwide knowledge of God during the first century, because as a result of these wars with Rome and the destruction, the havoc of the destruction of the Second Commonwealth, the knowledge of God and the observance of mitzvot were diminished.
I mean, the Romans wrote that in the book.
The author of the book of Revelation copied and pasted these prophecies and the language and the metaphors used in Daniel.
We have yet another fraud, the biggest of them all, and it's a fraud at the heart of Christianity.
To convey a theology that had nothing to do with the Jewish scriptures. We're not impressed with somebody who copied from the Jewish scriptures and inserted into their book.
If y'all going to church this Sunday, I suggest everybody get y'all to church and get your money back. Hurry up! If Joel Osteen didn't prove to you finally what I've been trying to tell you for 30 years, so them scam, man. God don't live in no church. God is free, don't forget it. God don't need no money, never wanted no money. Them Romans wrote that in the book Tithing. God want 10%. Them Romans wrote that in the book. So damn scam, man. Them Romans wrote that in the book.
They have Jesus saying, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, which is basically in response to talking about money. They have Jesus saying to turn the other cheek. They have Jesus saying,
slaves, obey your masters. It's an edict.
And you gotta admit to yourself that Jesus gig is up. You gotta admit to yourself this lie, man. It's a complete lie.
Come on, man. Y'all made this up. I'm teaching black people this book. I'm teaching black people this book. To a fictional white character, you can make the fictional white character turn into a black man. I'm teaching black people this book. I'm teaching black people this book.
1st, 2nd, and 3rd John was written by Julius Calpurnius Piso, and Revelation was written by Julius.
Revelations? What is it going to reveal? Because that's what it means. It's revealing something. But that book was written by Arius Calpurnius Piso's, actually his second son, which at the time was his oldest son living, Julius. Was his name, Julius. And the thing about Julius, this family, see, was very, very well connected and related to royalty.
Someone knows that was prophesied and they make it come true, right? Like the rise of Israel. When you support that as a Christian and you believe that that's prophecy, you're literally working to make a prophecy come true, right? Like you're like forcing that prophecy. So you're just making it happen and saying it was a prophecy. And then later...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but then you have other situations, like I said, where you might see something coming, like in the next 10 years or so, that it's like getting worse and things, like global warming is not a prophecy, right? It's a prediction based on trends and people saying, if we don't change some things, this is what we predict is going to happen. And if that happens, it's not a prophecy, right? It's like somebody looking at the data and the information and saying, this is what it looks like to me will happen. And it happens, that's not prophetic.
By the way, anytime any Christian comes at me with a claim of prophecy and they don't start with prophecies about Jesus, I know that on some level they already understand what the problem is, because that would be the only prophecies that matter. They have to deal with this funny little problem that, hey, here's all these prophecies that Jesus fulfilled, and yet all those prophecies are Jewish prophecies, and the Jews don't think Jesus fulfilled them.
When Matthew adopts the idea that Jesus was born to a virgin, and we have an infancy narrative in Matthew 1 and 2, what he does by claiming that Jesus was born to a virgin disqualifies him completely from being the Messiah. Because in order to be the Messiah, you have to come from the house of David. Your genealogy is identified by your father's house. Numbers chapter 1. Really, all over the place. That's why in the genealogy, it's men that matter, even in the genealogy found in both Matthew 1 and Luke 3. Your tribe identity is passed on in a patrilineal column. Mothers don't matter in this regard. So by claiming that Jesus lacked a human Jewish father, it raises staggering problems. Number one, he can't trace his genealogy back to King David. He can't, because the genealogy that we are served up in Matthew chapter 1, essentially the first 16 verses of the book of Matthew, is the genealogy of Joseph, not the genealogy of Jesus. Because Jesus was born to a virgin, then Joseph wasn't his father and could not convey the Davidic house. So whatever you want to think of the genealogy we find in Matthew chapter 1, and it's very problematic for other reasons that are beyond the scope of you. But what is germane is that we are told by Matthew that this is the genealogy of Joseph, and Joseph was not the father of Jesus. Joseph's genealogy then is not relevant. That is a huge deal. That's massive. And that's what happens. You get into trouble when you claim more and more, when you inculcate ideas, pagan ideas, the idea that the mother of God or the mother of the Savior could not have conceived through a natural means, which is widely known in the Greco-Roman world and beyond. It's everywhere. But the moment you do that, you just utterly sabotage any claim to messiahship. And Messiah